In early 2026, the average American household owes $105,000 in debt. The personal savings rate sits at 4.4%. According to Ramsey Solutions and Bankrate, 51% of Americans report living paycheck to paycheck, including a meaningful share of households earning over $500,000 a year. 27% of U.S. adults have zero emergency savings, the highest level ever recorded by Bankrate. By every headline metric, this is a financial system under stress. Now look across the Pacific. Japan's household saving rate is actually lower than America's, sitting at 3.9% in the fourth quarter of 2025, according to the Cabinet Office of Japan. Wages in Japan have stagnated for almost 3 decades. Interest rates have hovered near zero since 1999. On paper, Japanese households should be in worse shape than American ones. But Japanese families quietly hold trillions of dollars in long-term financial assets, with multi-generational businesses planning across centuries instead of quarters. Cultural restraint, post-war frugality, and Zen-influenced minimalism still shape daily money decisions in Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto in ways the average American household would barely recognize. The averages get skewed by a small minority of high-asset households, but the structural difference in behavior is real, measurable, and has been documented across decades of economic research. What nobody admits is that the gap between the two countries is not income. The gap is structure. The gap is 12 specific behaviors that have nothing to do with earning more, working harder, or chasing the next hot investment. This video is not going to teach the basic Kakeibo notebook concept that has already been covered to death across personal finance content. The basics are a starting point, not the destination. This video covers 12 specific applications that take the underlying philosophy and translate it directly into 2026 American financial life, with American dollar amounts, American spending categories, and American economic conditions. The boring ones work the best. That's not an accident. These principles trace back to a Japan rebuilt from post-war rubble, shaped by Zen-influenced restraint and a culture that treats financial discipline as a quiet form of dignity. None of them require Japanese citizenship to use. They require structure, repetition, and a willingness to feel slightly out of step with American spending culture for the next 10 to 20 years. By the end, you will have a complete framework that costs nothing to implement, requires no special apps or software, and works in any economic condition. The rest is just willingness. Number 1, the Kakeibo 4-question audit used before the purchase. Most American budgeting apps tell you what you spent after the money is gone. Kakeibo's actual mechanism is the opposite. Before any non-essential purchase, the user pauses and writes down the answers to 4 questions. How much money do I have right now? How much do I want to save by the end of the month? How much am I about to spend? And on what? How will this make my life genuinely better? Research published by Money Under 30 and Big Think found that consistent users of the Kakeibo method report savings of up to 35% on monthly discretionary spending. The mechanism is not complicated. The act of writing the answers down on physical paper, even for 30 seconds, creates psychological friction that a one-tap checkout button cannot replicate. Studies on handwriting and decision-making show that the slower neural processing required to physically write something engages working memory in ways typing simply does not. Apply this to a 2026 American context. Imagine pausing before a $140 Amazon order at 11 at night. Imagine writing down the balance in your high-yield savings account, the goal you set in January, and the actual reason you are buying the item. Imagine doing this with a pen and a kitchen counter. The order gets smaller. Sometimes it disappears entirely. A reader named Kristen, profiled in coverage of Kakeibo practitioners, discovered she had been spending nearly $300 per month on convenience store purchases she could not even remember making. Within 3 months of the 4-question audit, that category dropped to under $50. The money did not feel missed because it was never enjoyed in the first place. This habit is not about denial. It is about closing the gap between impulse and decision. That gap is where wealth quietly accumulates. But this next habit is the one that quietly determines whether your budget actually survives the year. Number 2, Hara Hachibu spending. The 80% rule. In Okinawa, the longest living region of Japan, Families practice a principle called Hara Hachibu. The rough translation is eat until 80% full. Centenarians in places like Naha attribute much of their longevity to this single rule. They never finish a meal feeling stuffed. They stop while still slightly hungry. The body adjusts within a few weeks, and the surplus calories that would have caused chronic disease never get consumed. Apply this concept to a budget instead of a plate. The vast majority of American budgets are designed to spend exactly 100% of the available money. Rent, utilities, groceries, transportations, and discretionary categories together consume almost every dollar of after-tax income. There is no margin. One unexpected medical bill or car repair triggers credit card debt. The Hara Hachibu version of budgeting deliberately stops at 80%. If your post-tax income is $6,000 per month, your entire spending plan, including all discretionary categories, is built around $4,800. The remaining $1,200 is invisible. It moves to savings, brokerage, or sinking funds the moment the paycheck arrives. This is not the same as saving 20%. The distinction matters. Saving 20% means trying to set money aside after spending. Hara Hachibu spending means the spending plan itself only covers 80% of available income. So the other 20% never enters the spending decision in the first place. The behavioral difference is everything. This habit is admittedly uncomfortable. It feels like you cannot afford the lifestyle you actually earn. That discomfort is the signal that it is working. According to Goldman Sachs research cited in 2025, more than 40% of Americans earning over $300,000 still report living paycheck to paycheck. 40% of those earning over $500,000 say the same. Those households are running their budgets at 100% capacity. Lifestyle has expanded to perfectly match income at every step. The 80% rule is the structural fix that prevents this trap regardless of income level. Number 3, Mottainai, the principle of waste being shameful. The Japanese word Mottainai carries a meaning that does not fully translate into English. It expresses a deep cultural sense that waste of food, of materials, of opportunity is morally uncomfortable. A grandmother in Kyoto using vegetable scraps for the next morning's miso broth is not being frugal. She is acting on a value system inherited across generations. The Japanese tradition of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer, is the same principle made visible. The repair becomes part of the object's story. The flaw becomes more valuable than the original perfection. In a 2026 American context, Mottainai shows up as a single decision: repair before you replace. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, the average American household spends approximately $1,800 per year on clothing, much of it discarded after just a few wears. Fast fashion has compressed the lifespan of an item from years to months. Phones get replaced on 24-month cycles. Furniture gets thrown away when a single leg breaks. Appliances get scrapped instead of serviced. The average American family of 4 also throws away approximately $1,500 in food each year, a perfect example of the same Mottainai violation extended into the kitchen. The Mottainai approach treats every owned object as a long-term asset. A pair of leather boots gets resold 3 times instead of replaced. A washing machine gets a $120 repair instead of a $1,500 replacement. A laptop battery gets swapped for $60 instead of triggering a new device purchase. A torn winter coat gets a $30 tailor visit instead of a $400 new one. A scratched dining table gets refinished instead of curbed. The math is unforgiving. Repairing items at 30 to 40% of replacement cost across a decade saves the average household between $15,000 and $25,000. That number, invested at conservative market returns from age 35 to age 65, becomes well over $100,000. The visible cost is the repair receipt. The invisible cost is everything that would have been thrown away. That number is the kind of number that makes accountants quietly nod. Number 4. Gaman, the practice of restraint. Gaman is one of the most respected concepts in Japanese culture. It translates roughly to perseverance with patience. A worker who endures a difficult assignment without complaint demonstrates Gaman. A family that waits 10 years to upgrade their home demonstrates Gaman. The cultural value placed on restraint is the opposite of the American expression treat yourself. In Japan, the ability to want something and not act on it is considered a sign of maturity, not deprivation. The financial application is simple and brutal. For any non-essential purchase over $200, impose a 30-day waiting period. No exceptions. Add the item to a list with the date. Revisit at the end of the month. According to behavioral research summarized across multiple consumer studies, the vast majority of impulse purchase desires fade within the first 2 weeks. The brain that wanted the item on day 1 frequently does not recognize the same impulse on day 21. The 30-day list becomes a graveyard of cravings that quietly died on their own. The same neural reward circuit that lights up at the moment of purchase desire goes dark within days when the action is delayed. This decision seems small at the time. It is not. A household practicing this single rule across a year typically eliminates 15 to 20 discretionary purchases worth $200 or more. That is $3,000 to $4,000 annually that never leaves the account. Across 30 years of working life, invested in a low-cost index fund, that habit alone produces a six-figure outcome. The boring math of restraint, compounding silently, beats almost any active strategy attempted by the same person. The companion benefit is rarely discussed. The items that survive the 30-day list are the items the household actually uses. Closets stop filling with regret purchases. Garages stop filling with hobby equipment that gets used twice. Kitchens stop filling with single-purpose gadgets that gather dust. The space stays clear because the wrong purchases never happen in the first place. Number 5. Hansei, the monthly reflection ritual. Hansei is the Japanese practice of structured self-reflection. Toyota uses it after every project, including successful ones, to identify what could have been done better. The practice is built on a counterintuitive idea. Reflection on success matters more than reflection on failure, because successful patterns often disguise hidden weaknesses. A month where the budget worked perfectly might still contain $300 in autopilot spending that nobody noticed, because the top-line numbers looked fine. Apply Hansei to personal finance. The first Sunday of every month, sit down with the previous month's bank and credit card statements. Categorize every charge. Look at the categories that came in under budget. Look at the ones that went over. Most importantly, look at the categories that hit budget exactly. That precision is often a sign of unconscious lifestyle creep, not discipline. A grocery budget that hits $400 every single month to the dollar often means the household is rounding up to the budget rather than spending what is actually needed. Ask 3 questions. What did I spend money on that produced no memorable benefit? What did I spend money on that produced disproportionate value? What recurring charge can be eliminated, reduced, or renegotiated before next month? Add a 4th question for completeness. Where did I spend money out of stress, boredom, or social pressure rather than genuine want? The honest answer to that question typically points to between 1 and 3 categories that quietly absorb hundreds of dollars per month. The Federal Reserve's 2024 Survey of Household Economics and Decision-Making found that 37% of American adults still cannot cover a $400 emergency without borrowing or selling something. That number has not improved meaningfully across multiple survey cycles. The Hansei practice exists to break that pattern. Without monthly reflection, spending defaults to autopilot, and autopilot defaults to consuming everything available. Hansei takes between 20 and 40 minutes once a month. The compounding return on that time investment is difficult to measure precisely, but it is the closest thing to a guaranteed financial improvement the average household can implement. Number 6, Shu-Ha-Ri, the path to investing mastery, originally from martial arts and the tea ceremony. It describes 3 stages. Shu, follow the rules exactly. Ha, break the rules with understanding. Ri, transcend the rules entirely. A student who tries to skip the first stage and innovate immediately creates expensive mistakes. The phrase is sometimes attributed to Sen no Rikyu, the 16th century tea master, and the principle has shaped Japanese craft traditions for almost 500 years. American retail investing in 2026 is a graveyard of skipped first stages. Beginners who have never owned a single index fund jump directly into options trading. New investors who do not understand expense ratios chase leveraged ETFs and cryptocurrency tokens. The 2024 Bankrate data on emergency savings shows that the same households reporting they cannot cover a $1,000 emergency are also the most likely to be holding speculative positions. The pattern is consistent. The skipped first stage produces the predictable later failure. The Shu-Ha-Ri investing path looks unglamorous from the outside. Shu means selecting one broad market index fund, contributing automatically every paycheck for at least 3 years, and learning nothing else during that period. No reallocations, no reading market commentary, just the quiet repetition of contribution and growth. The S&P 500 index has produced average annual returns of roughly 10% over the long term. The household that spends 3 years simply contributing without interfering will outperform the vast majority of active retail investors who spend the same period optimizing. Ha begins only after the first stage is mastered. Maybe a second fund gets added for international exposure. Maybe a small allocation gets moved to bonds as the time horizon shortens. Each change is studied and slow. The decisions are made from a position of demonstrated competence rather than a position of guesswork. Ri is the stage where most American retail investors start, and that is precisely why they fail. The Japanese pension system and the average Japanese retail investor share a preference for slow, dividend-yielding, low volatility positions held for decades. The boring approach to investing is the boring approach for a reason. It works. If you took only one habit from this video and applied it for the next 30 years, this would be the one with the largest financial impact. But the next several are the ones that protect the conditions that allow this one to work. Number 7, the Tanomoshi Accountability Circle, modernized. In rural Japan, and especially in older Okinawan communities, families participated in Tanomoshi, a rotating savings group. A small group of trusted neighbors each contributed a fixed amount monthly. Each round, one member took the entire pot, with the rotation continuing until everyone had received a turn. The system was not about earning interest. It was about social accountability. The shame of failing to contribute in a tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone else was more effective than any contractual penalty. The 2026 American version does not require pooling money. The mechanism is the accountability itself. 3 or 4 trusted friends agree to share a private monthly spreadsheet: net worth, savings rate, debt balance, and one financial decision they are wrestling with. The numbers are real. The conversation is structured. The shame of skipping a month is more effective than any budgeting app. According to research from Charles Schwab's 2026 Modern Wealth Survey, Americans now define wealthy as having $2.3 million in net worth and financially comfortable at $839,000. Those numbers are the result of social comparison, much of it driven by curated social media feeds. Goldman Sachs explicitly cited keeping up with the Joneses as a driver of paycheck to paycheck living among high earners in its 2025 report. The Tanomoshi Pact replaces unhealthy comparison with structured truth. The friends in the circle become a private benchmark that actually reflects reality instead of an Instagram feed showing everyone's highlight reel. The structure of the conversation matters. Each person reports the same 5 data points: net worth change since last month, savings rate for the month, total non-mortgage debt, one financial mistake or near mistake from the month, one decision being considered for next month. No advice is offered unless requested. The simple act of speaking the numbers aloud to people who will see them again next month is the entire mechanism. A small group of 3 or 4 people meeting once a month for 45 minutes often outperforms every paid financial planning service the same households would otherwise consider. The structure is older than financial apps by several centuries. Number 8. Cash-first spending for high-velocity categories. Japan remains a cash-heavy economy in 2026, despite years of digital payment adoption. A typical Tokyo household still uses physical yen for groceries, dining, transportation, and entertainment. Credit cards exist, but they are reserved for specific large categories rather than daily life. The behavioral consequence is significant. The MIT Sloan School of Management research on payment psychology, replicated multiple times since the early 2000s, shows that physical cash spending produces measurably less expenditure than card spending on the same categories. The friction of counting bills, watching the wallet thin, and physically handing money to a cashier slows down the transaction. Each purchase feels like an actual loss, because it is one, tap to pay and one-click checkout were specifically engineered by payment companies to remove this friction. The friction was the mechanism that protected the consumer. Apply this to the highest velocity spending categories in 2026: American life, restaurants, coffee, bars, convenience stores, quick groceries. Withdraw a fixed amount of cash each Sunday for these categories. When the cash is gone, the category is closed for the week. The system needs to be specific. $200 and $20 bills, loaded into an envelope every Sunday morning, allocated mentally across the week. When the envelope is empty on Thursday, restaurants close until Sunday. The week does not end in disaster. It ends in a slightly leaner Friday and Saturday, and the household notices that life continued perfectly well. According to Empower's most recent reports, the average American household spends $179 per month on food delivery alone, up over 10% year over year. Streaming and rideshare have grown at similar rates. These are exactly the categories where cash friction would cut spending the fastest. The household using cash for restaurants and coffee typically reduces those categories by 30 to 40% within 60 days, without consciously deciding to spend less. The wallet decides for them. The relief of not having to make the willpower decision in the moment is itself a benefit, separate from the financial savings. If this video is helping you, the algorithm rewards small signals. Now back to the habits, because the next 4 are where this whole system locks together. Number 9, Wabi-Sabi, the imperfect budget that survives. Wabi-Sabi is the Japanese aesthetic philosophy that finds beauty in imperfection, transience, and the worn surfaces of long-used objects. A cracked tea bowl repaired with gold lacquer in the kintsugi tradition is considered more beautiful than the original. The flaws are honored, not hidden. The philosophy extends far beyond ceramics. It shapes how Japanese households think about success, failure, and the long passage of time. This concept solves the single biggest reason American budgets fail: perfectionism. A household sets a strict monthly budget on January 1st. The first 3 weeks go well. On day 22, an unplanned expense breaks the plan. The natural response is to abandon the entire system and start over next month. By March, the cycle repeats. By June, budgeting feels like a recurring failure, and the household stops trying. By October, the household has spent 9 months feeling defeated by a system that was perfectly capable of working at 80% capacity. The Wabi-Sabi approach treats imperfection as expected. A budget that hits 80% of its targets is functioning correctly. A month with one overspend in one category is not a failure. It is data. The plan adjusts the following month, the year continues, and the compounding savings still happen. Reframe what success means. Success is not a perfectly executed January. Success is a 15th consecutive year of imperfect budgeting that nonetheless produced a higher net worth than the household had at the start. The cracks in the system are part of the system. The repairs are part of the structure. Sustainability beats intensity every single time. The household that runs an imperfect budget for 10 consecutive years quietly outperforms the household that runs 3 perfect months and then quits. According to multiple personal finance studies, summarized by Charles Schwab in 2026, consistency of behavior is a stronger predictor of long-term net worth than intensity of effort. Quiet, imperfect, multi-decade budgeting wins. Number 10, Kaizen, the 1% annual savings escalation. Kaizen is the philosophy of continuous incremental improvement. Toyota built one of the largest manufacturing operations in human history on the principle that getting 1% better today, every day, beats waiting for a single transformative breakthrough that may never come. The same philosophy shapes how Japanese workers approach personal skill development, household management, and long-term financial planning. Apply Kaizen to the savings rate, not the budget itself. Most American households save somewhere between 3 and 6% of gross income annually, far below the 10 to 15% that financial advisors generally recommend. Jumping from 5% to 15% overnight is unsustainable for almost everyone. Lifestyle adjusts in the wrong direction, the household feels deprived, and the new rate collapses within 90 days. The Kaizen alternative looks almost laughable in its modesty. Increase the savings rate by 1 percentage point per year. That is it. Year 1, 6%. Year 2, 7%. 8%. Year 10, 15%. The household barely notices each annual change because the increase is small enough to hide inside the natural 1 to 3% annual raises that most workers receive. The lifestyle never feels reduced. The savings rate quietly triples across a decade. The implementation is mechanical. Set a recurring calendar reminder for January 1st of every year. On that date, log into the retirement account or automatic transfer settings and increase the contribution by exactly 1 percentage point. The change takes 90 seconds. The compound effect is enormous. The math is unforgiving. In the best possible way, a household earning $75,000 per year, escalating 1% annually, starting at age 30, retires with hundreds of thousands of dollars more than the same household stuck at a flat 6%. Same income, same spending, different protocol. This is the habit that quietly does the heaviest lifting. It almost never gets credit because it is too small to feel impressive in any single year. Number 11, Shoshin, the beginner's mind subscription audit. Shoshin is a Zen concept meaning beginner's mind. A practitioner approaches even familiar tasks as if seeing them for the first time. Free of assumptions, the application to personal finance is brutal. Once a year, ideally in the same month every year, sit down with the last 12 months of credit card and bank statements and audit every recurring charge as if you had never seen it before. Streaming services, software subscriptions, gym memberships, cloud storage, app subscriptions, insurance riders, donations on autopay, newsletter subscriptions, wholesale club memberships, magazine subscriptions inherited from a previous decade, free trials that quietly converted to paid memberships 18 months ago. According to Empower's 2025 spending data, the average American household carries somewhere around $273 per month in active subscriptions, much of it forgotten or barely used. That is over $3,200 a year, much of it draining accounts. On autopilot, the Shoshin question applied to each one is simple. If I were not already paying for this, would I sign up today at this price, knowing what I now know about my actual usage? If the answer is no, the subscription gets canceled immediately. No negotiation with yourself. No, I'll cancel next month. Particular categories deserve extra scrutiny. Streaming services with overlapping content libraries, gym memberships that get used fewer than 4 times per month, premium versions of free apps where the free version actually solves the problem, cable bundles still attached to a landline that has not been used in a decade, insurance riders sold during a previous life event that no longer applies. The first audit of a typical American household typically eliminates between $800 and $1,500 per year in subscriptions that produce no remembered value. That money invested across a working career easily exceeds $100,000 in retirement assets. The audit takes about 90 minutes once a year. The hourly return on that time is, conservatively, the highest in personal finance. Number 12, generational stewardship, the 50-year horizon. The final habit is the one that quietly reframes everything before it. Japanese culture takes generational thinking seriously in a way that has almost no equivalent in modern American life. Family businesses in Kyoto plan across centuries. The Mukoyoshi practice, in which families adopt adult sons-in-law to continue the lineage of competent leadership, creates institutions that survive across hundreds of years. Over 80,000 such adoptions still take place annually in Japan. mostly involving men in their 20s and 30s. Wealth, in this framework, is not a personal score. It is a stewardship across time. Translate that into American financial behavior in 2026. Every major financial decision gets evaluated on a 50-year horizon, not a 5-year one. The house purchase is not, can I afford the payment this year? It is, will this asset still serve the next generation? Or will it be sold under pressure when I retire? The car purchase is not, can I get approved for the loan? It is, does this transportation decision align with the financial life I want at age 70? This single shift changes almost every line item in a household budget. The cheaper house quietly becomes the better house. The reliable used car becomes the obvious car. The retirement account becomes a generational vehicle, not a personal scoreboard. The estate plan, often delayed for decades by American households, gets handled in the first year of marriage or the first year of significant income, because future generations are real people, not abstractions. The shift extends into the smallest decisions. A subscription is no longer evaluated only on this month's value. It is evaluated on the cumulative cost across 30 years if it remains active. A home renovation is not evaluated only on aesthetic improvement. It is evaluated on whether it preserves or destroys long-term resale value. A career decision is not evaluated only on next year's salary. It is evaluated on the trajectory it sets across the next 20 years. The Japanese family business that has operated for 400 years did not survive because of brilliant single-generation decisions. It survived because every generation refused to consume more than it produced, refused to risk the inheritance for short-term gains, and treated wealth as something held in trust. American households practicing generational stewardship in 2026 quietly join a tradition that is older than most modern nations. Now, 12 habits is a lot to absorb in one sitting, but the pattern beneath them is simple. And the pattern is the point. Every habit on this list works through the same underlying mechanism. Each one inserts structure between impulse and action. The Kakeibo audit slows down the purchase. The Hara Hachibu rule removes spending capacity before lifestyle expands to fill it. Mottainai delays cravings. Hansei catches drift early. Shu-Ha-Ri prevents costly investing experiments. Tanomoshi creates social accountability. Cash first adds friction as quitting. Kaizen makes savings rate increases invisible. Shoshin clears subscription clutter. Generational stewardship reframes the entire timeline. None of these habits require a higher income. None of them require a side hustle or a productivity system or a complicated app stack. They require a willingness to be slightly out of step with American spending culture for the next 10 to 20 years, and the patience to let compounding do its quiet work in the background. The Japanese household savings statistics tell only part of the story. The structural part of the story is the part that matters. Wealth that survives recessions, inflation cycles, tariff shocks, and decades of stagnant interest rates is built by these kinds of habits, not by clever timing. Look at what the data actually shows. The Bureau of Economic Analysis confirms the American personal savings rate is roughly half of its 60-year historical average. According to PYM-NTS intelligence research from January 2026, roughly 2/3 of American consumers continue to live paycheck to paycheck in early 2026. The Federal Reserve's 2024 SHED report documented that 37% of U.S. adults still cannot cover a $400 emergency. These are not statistics about poor people. They are statistics about a country where the structural habits required to build sustainable wealth have been gradually replaced by structural habits that consume it. The 12 Japanese habits in this video are the structural alternative. They are the version of financial life that gets practiced, not preached. The version that does not require a six-figure income, a market timing genius, or an inheritance to start working. The version that, applied across decades, quietly produces the kind of wealth that does not need to announce itself. Now, here is the part that matters most for actually applying any of this. These 12 habits assume something underneath them. They assume the household has not already walked into the predictable financial traps that quietly destroy the ability to use any of this wisdom in the first place. The retiree practicing generational stewardship at age 65 only gets to do so because the same person at age 25 and 35 and 45 did not fall into the specific debt traps, lifestyle traps, and timing traps that derail the average American across each decade. That is the foundation underneath the foundation. The Japanese habits compound only when the underlying financial life is structured correctly. Skip the traps in your 20s, the traps in your 30s, the traps in your 40s, and these habits become rocket fuel. Hit those traps, and even the best habits in this video cannot fully recover the lost decades. This is where most personal finance content quietly fails its audience. It teaches the habits without teaching the traps. It assumes a clean foundation that most American households simply do not have. The result is a household that adopts Kakeibo and Hara Hachibu and Shoshin perfectly and still ends up underwater because of one specific trap that hit at age 28 or 35 and never got addressed. That is precisely the topic of the most important video on this channel, the breakdown of every financial trap at every age, from your 20s straight through retirement. Every age has a specific set of mistakes that quietly cost households 6 and 7 figures across a lifetime. The student loan trap in your 20s looks different from the lifestyle creep trap in your 30s, which looks different from the helicopter parenting trap in your 40s, which looks different from the early Social Security claim trap in your 60s. Knowing the traps at each decade is the prerequisite for everything you just heard. It is the foundation any real financial life is built on, and it pairs directly with the 12 habits in this video. The order matters. Avoid the traps first, then layer these habits on top, then watch Quiet Wealth build, year after boring year, in accounts nobody else sees. That is how it has worked in Japan for centuries. That is how it can work in America starting this month. For anyone willing to be patient enough to let it,